What's up, guys? Welcome back. This will be the fourth round of the Westchester tournament. This is actually the third round for me because I took 1 week off. So I'll be entering the tournament with a score of 2.5 out of 3. Um, I'm playing with the white pieces. My opponent is rated approximately 1500. I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but I will say it's the most exciting game I've played so far. It's also my biggest blunder, not just in the tournament, but also in years past as well. So, without further ado, let's hop into the action. Um, I played e4, my favorite first move, the same as last week. And he played the Caro Kann, which is c6. Now, Caro and Kann were English and Austrian grandmasters in the late 1800s who popularized this opening. Now, this was a favorite of one of the former world champions, Anatoly Karpov, who is known to have a very solid and defensive style of play. So he's sort of the Tim Duncan of chess. He never did anything flashy, but he was certainly one of the best all-around players of all time. Okay, so I played d4, d5. Now white has a number of choices at this point. I played the classical variation, which is knight c3. Black also has a few moves that he can choices of moves that he can play at this point. I think knight d7 is the most popular, although back in Karpov's day, bishop f5 was more popular, which is what he played. Knight g3 and a bishop d6. Now, before I go over the move that I played, I just want to show the main line of this opening. The most common move for white is knight f3, usually after knight f6. White will usually go after the bishop with h4. Of course, if black just plays a inconsequential move like a knight d7, for example, then white will be able to trap the bishop. So black will oftentimes play h6 and then h5, bishop h7. So that's a standard way to play. So in these openings, black is usually used to playing h6. So I actually played a sideline at this point, and I played knight ge2. And this actually came out of one of the books that I used to read. Now, this book was published in the late 90s, certainly well into the computer age, but it had some really interesting opening ideas with the goal of really surprising your opponent. And we'll see what happened in a minute and why this is surprising. E6. And the idea of knight g2 is to immediately go after the light squared bishop with knight f4. Of course, after knight f6 and h4, it's very difficult for him to play h6 because then white can just simply capture on g6 and mess up black's pawn structure. So usually when we reach this position, when I play someone who hasn't seen this before, they're more likely to just let me take the bishop and get the bishop pair. Now, this isn't necessarily bad for black. Of course, white has had to waste a lot of time moving his knight multiple times to capture the bishop, and black usually gets some decent counterplay, so it's still about even. But it's a good way to get black out of his prep. But in this case, I was very surprised when he played h6. Of course, I took the bishop. And now I actually had a long think because it's been so long that I've faced this position that I couldn't remember if it was best to put the bishop on the c4 square to pressure the e-pawn, or if it was better to put the bishop on the d3 square to pressure the g-pawn. Fortunately, the engine thinks they're both close or equivalent. It does prefer bishop c4 slightly more, but I play bishop d3. There's only one move to defend it, king f7, and I played h5, with the idea being that if he were to take, which he did not do, I would take back with the knight. Of course, he cannot take the so-called free d-pawn because of this check would win the queen. But I now have ideas of trading knights and getting my queen into h5 and getting a quick attack going against the black king. But actually he played g5, which I was happy to see because now it leaves a gaping hole, weakness in g6, which my bishop can infiltrate. So I played c3 with two ideas. First of all, I was planning to move my queen, and I wanted to make sure I had good protection to the d-pawn. And also this would allow my queen to get out. I thought it would be well placed on the b3 square with ideas of pressuring both the e-pawn and the b-pawn. I played bishop e6 and went ahead with my plan, queen b3. And he actually played the best move here, which is queen b6. So this is essentially just offering a queen trade. Now the engine thinks, given the fact that his king is misplaced here, and I have a strong piece activity, that I should try to keep the queens on the board, possibly with a move like queen c4 or queen c2. But it's difficult for me to move my queen again after I've just put it on b3. So after a very long think, I decided on a very interesting and speculative combination, and I wasn't sure at the time whether or not it was a brilliancy or a blunder. But if you want to, you can pause the video and try to figure out what I did here. So hopefully you figured out that I went for a very interesting sacrifice, bishop g6. Of course, he has to defend the e-pawn, which is attacked by the queen, and followed by knight f5. Now, the idea being that if he takes the knight, which he did not do, then I can come into f7. He only has one legal move. I can take the g-pawn, and he only has one way to protect both the rook and the knight, which is rook f8, and then I can take this pawn. And I thought for sure these pawns would also be weak, and I'm likely to win both of them. And I'm going to have a very strong king side with 3 pawns, certainly with one pawn very advanced on the 5th rank. Meanwhile, and he still has to develop his queen side. So I thought this was very strong for me. Unfortunately, engines defend perfectly, and the engine actually thinks black is better here. It has ideas of defending with his queen, getting his queen back to the action to e7, its other pieces out, and putting up an accurate defense. So let's go back. So fortunately for me, he did not call my bluff. And in this position, he played king d7. And now I decided to keep the queens on the board with queen c4, with the idea being that certainly now if he takes, I thought this was even better because this the f-pawn could be captured with check. But he didn't take the knight this time either. He played queen b5. So I took his bishop with the idea being that, of course, he cannot trade queens because then I'll recapture with the knight, thereby winning a piece. But he did, in fact, take with the king. And now I played a b3, which the engine likes, with the idea of defending my queen, but more importantly, creating space for my bishop to get out and attack the king. He did trade queens, knight bd7, and as mentioned, bishop a3. And at this point, I thought I was almost winning. So despite the fact that there is material equality, we both have 7 pawns and 2 minor pieces, the bishops should be much better than the 2 knights. They're really crisscrossing his position and controlling a lot of the center squares. Even though it's legal for me to castle either way, I thought it was best to just leave my king in the center of the board. Hopefully try to tuck it into d3, where I thought it would be safe and also protecting my pawns, which is what I did. King d2, knight b6, and king d3. And here he played knight g4, which I did see. My idea was that if he did try this, I was just going to defend the pawn and play f3, which is what happened. So I played rook h f1 and put one of his rooks in the center. And I quickly played f3, thinking he would just return and I would go on and try to improve my position. And the second after I made this move, I realized that I blundered. Um, um, Now, it should be a relatively easy move to find. Um, so I'm not going to ask you to pause the video. Um, but it was actually very painful for me to sit there because he actually spent at least 3-4 minutes thinking before he played it, where of course I saw it immediately. And the move is 95, taking advantage of the fact that the d-pawn is pinned. Now, it's very important in this case that if you blunder, that you don't lose your composure. I realized that I was probably went from a winning position to being worse, but at the same time, I'm not losing, and I still need to keep my composure and make good moves, which is what happened. Over the next few moves, I slowly managed to improve my position back to an even position. So I played king e4. He now took the pawn, which I was happy with. I would have been less happy if he took one of my bishops. Of course, now he's threatening to fork the king and the rook with knight d2, and he's also threatening my bishop. So there's only one move to protect both of those. Bishop c1. He played knight d5, attacking the c pawn, and I defended it. And b5. So now my bishop has very limited scope. It cannot go to any of these squares. So I decided to play a4 with the goal of getting my rook out, activating my rook on the a file. King b6. And rook e1, going after the e-pawn. Of course, he cannot defend it on e8 with one of his rooks because the bishop is attacking that. And he played e5. Now, incidentally, the engine thinks that it's actually okay to simply take the pawn, but I was afraid to do that and just open up a discovered attack against my king with the rook. It also looked like at some point he was going to put his knight into f4, which would almost force me to capture it. So I played bishop f7 with the idea being that once he put his knight into here, I would have some type of attack on the c4 knight. And of course, I'm putting pressure on his d5 knight. So he traded pawns and then played knight b4, which the engine doesn't like. So in the last few moves, despite the fact I made one of the worst blunders I've ever made, it was a -5 blunder. I went from about +3 to -2. I've now made some good moves over the last 4 or 5 moves, and I've come back to approximately even. Black has just a very slight plus here. I played king c3, keeping a watchful eye on the d-pawn, and he went back with a check, and I took it. Of course, he took back with the with rook, which is correct, preserving his defense to the b-pawn with his pawn, which I took, and then he can take with his b-pawn. And I played rook e6. The idea being that if he were to move his king back to the 7th rank, I can check him again, and then I'll have 2 pieces on the a7 pawn, and also be putting pressure on the g-pawn. I was expecting him to play rook d6, with the idea being that now I can play rook e7. First of all, I'm putting pressure on both the a-pawn and the g-pawn. And a lot of variations, I'll be able to capture the pawn and then come into g6, thereby pinning his rook and preventing him from capturing on a d4. Meanwhile, the engine thinks that rook e7 is a bad idea, and I should take my chance and just trade rooks at this point. Let's go back. But fortunately for me, he blundered and played knight d6, which loses pretty quickly. Of course, the knight is pinned, so I attacked it. And he played rook c8. And I played my next move pretty quickly. I played bishop c5, with the idea being that, of course, if he moves his king, I'll be able to take the a-pawn. So it almost forces him to sacrifice the exchange. Um, Now the engine thinks this is actually a mistake, and a much better move is to get my king first off of the c file, where it cannot be pinned, and next move, then to play rook, bishop c5, where he will have to give up, where he will have to lose the exchange, but also give up his a pawn. Now we'll see why in a minute. So let's go back. So I played bishop c5, and this forces him to give up the exchange. And fortunately for me, he made the losing move at this point. The correct move is to take with the king. Of course, then I can take the a pawn. But he actually has a lot of playability here. So despite the fact he's down in exchange for a pawn, this b pawn can become very strong. And I really have to watch out for his knight, aiding in the attack and the support of the pawn. So the engine gives us a slight plus for white. But fortunately for me, he took with the rook, which just loses. First of all, I played king d4, so threatening the knight. He has only one move to defend it. And now I played king d5, which he will now need to lose a piece. If he moves his knight, I can take his rook. Otherwise, I'll just, and if he comes back to defend this way, I can take his a pawn. So he didn't do that. I took his knight. He played a5. I checked him by discovery, and then took his a pawn, whereupon he resigned. So what to say about this game? So first of all, if we look at the review, I played an 80, which is certainly far below my level, and I could certainly not expect to win against stronger competition. At the same time, I was happy with the fact that after blundering, I sat on my hands, I retained my composure, and I continued to make good moves throughout the rest of the game, and managed to come back from a losing position to win. So with that, I'm going to bring the review to a close. I hope you're enjoying the recaps. Next week, we will be playing a expert level player. He's actually unrated, but he plays approximately expert strength, so relatively similar to myself. I'll also be playing with the black pieces this time, so I'll need to bring my A game. So we hope you're enjoying the recaps, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks for watching.